Hi, my name is David Gwyn from FME, and the purpose of today's session is to help you understand our lessons learned, our experience around the AM&D world, the acquisitions, mergers, and divestiture space, where we've got a lot of experience working with clients in that space. And we wanted to share some tips, some tricks, some lessons learned with you in that area. So how we will approach that is we'll start off with a bit of a background of who is FME and why are we here and why are we sharing this with you, and then talk about the AM&D challenge. What are those things that we're trying to address? And then we'll walk through a four-step framework that shows you how to get started, how to build a foundation, how to build on that and build a repeatable, very streamlined approach to dealing with mergers, which are commonplace now in life sciences, of course. We'll summarize that then with some lessons learned, touch very briefly on how we package that together in something we call TransferAssist, and then open it up to any follow-on questions. Now, please feel free to raise those questions throughout. My colleague Meghan will be monitoring that as I'm speaking, and we'll go back and forth and be able to try to address them real time. So, a bit on introductions. Again, I'm David Gwyn. The reason I'm here in the context of AM&D is I've got nearly 35 years in this space in life sciences, implementing solutions where clients are moving from old systems to new systems, very similar to how an AM&D transaction happens, where on the acquisition side, a company is buying something else. They're buying a product line, they're buying pipeline, but they're also inheriting the systems and the data with them. And so we've done numerous AM&D activities for clients, and I head up business consulting services, so the business aspect of that, which is why I'll take you through the processes around that. And I'm very excited to have my treasured colleague, Meghan, join me today, and I'd like to turn it over to her to introduce herself and to give us that background.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Meghan Carr, and I head up the technology services. So David and I work hand in hand with the business and the technical components of the M&A experience for our clients. My heritage is more in the quality space, but the challenges persist. I've been involved in M&A for the last 10 to 15 years. Every single one is challenging, breakneck speed, temporary use agreements. Do I have the infrastructure? So seeing this time and time again, and as David said, we've been really deeply involved with our clients over the last 2 years, really, that are in heavy, high single-digit M&A mode, within each year. So really excited to talk to you about what we've been seeing and how we've really responded to what the market's been asking of us to make it a repeatable process for our clients. So why should you listen to us? So FME has been around since 1995. Migration really is our heritage as well. We've been focused on the life sciences space for the last 20 years or so, working deeply with the world's largest pharmaceutical organizations. We span from truly technical migrations to data quality, managed services, everything to keep a seamless experience for our clients during their digital transformation. We're a global company. We follow the sun when it comes to taking care of our clients, and we are deeply experienced with multiple enterprise platforms that our clients have chosen to standardize on and understand how to get organizations that are being acquired onto them quickly because of our deep knowledge of how our clients are stood up. So as David said, he's handling the business process side of it. He helps our clients understand how the system should be working, how it'll be accepted, how to make the data useful for our clients that's actually reportable on, as well as, like I said, the keyboard time, the hands-on technical experience with implementation and moving the data back and forth to keeping your system healthy and alive, also maintaining your legacy systems while you're going through that experience of an M&A. So what makes FME so different? We focus on the life sciences industry. That's where we are eyeball deep into it every single day, from regulatory, clinical to quality. We understand the problems. We understand what happens when an inspector shows up at your door and why you need to be prepared for it. We are prepared for these global acquisitions. You might be acquiring a large organization. We have the experience of understanding how we're going to segment things out. Here's how we're going to make sure it's a smooth experience for each group. As I described earlier, we have deep experience with the world's largest platform. So we understand some of the technical limitations. We understand the best practices for getting data in and out of systems so that you can continue along with your business so it feels as painless as possible. David and myself, every single day, we're involved in these experiences for our clients. We are shoulder to shoulder with our clients to make sure that they have what they need, give them insight into what could be a challenge, giving them, 6 months ahead. How is this going to work for you? How do you consider this? How are your users going to react to this? What's your documentation going to look like? So we really focus on how your business is going to be performing. We want this to be a repeatable experience so that it's not as clunky, painful, lost time, the learning curve of getting into a new system. All of these things people don't really consider once the ink has been signed. And again, we have that follow the sun model. So we're making sure that your users, whether it's from the United States to Europe to India, we have our personnel available to make sure we can keep the machine moving for you. So as I said, we go like that. United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Romania and India. So our team is well diversified so that we make sure that we don't have it. We're not a choke point for you. As I said, these M&A experiences are extremely fast. People have to be into the systems at such a rapid pace. So we are going to be your accelerator to make sure that that happens. So things that we know about acquisitions, mergers, and divestitures. So the data integrity and quality is so important. And what does that mean? We're coming from legacy systems that have never even heard of what the acquiring company has ever done. That they've never been designed to work like that at all. And somehow we're supposed to make that happen in the fastest one I've ever done, I think, has been 3 months. Sometimes people want it done in 4 weeks, and that's just simply not possible. So we'll also tell you the truth about what we can and cannot do. That said, these are completely different systems. And your organization that you're acquiring doesn't know how your organization, the acquiring organization's target system works. They have no idea. Who's going to translate that for you? That's where we step in. And this is something that we have seen across all of these platforms, different sizes and scales of organizations. We are able to translate that for you to remove that, okay, this is called this over here. What should it be called over here? That is your time eater. And people don't understand how nuanced that work is. David's team specializes in this to relieve the business of that burden of trying to make those decisions, providing really purpose-built first step taken. Here's how it should look, confirm it. Deep expertise in the regulatory compliance space, from IDMP to all of the European regulations that we have to follow. This is what we live and breathe every single day. We know that 21 CFR Part 11 like the back of our hands. So we're always going to be there making sure that you're compliant and audit ready, because we know that can happen at any time. Next, your people. This is something that I feel like sometimes flies under the radar. Not only is an organization being acquired, I wonder if anyone here has been part of a company that's been acquired. I have. It's painful. You get thrown into these new systems. You're expected to know how they work, and you're supposed to know what new group you're in and what drop down to pick. And you're like, my laptop simply doesn't even work. These people are going to be under a tremendous amount of stress. So this will help them not only relieve that stress, but also have them get acquainted with the system so much quicker so that they can continue that productivity. These organizations have been acquired for a reason. Very smart people doing really important work. We don't want to slow that down. So that organization change management is so important, and having a roadmap for them to get onboarded quickly and to allow for them to be effective is so critical for the success of the M&A. And then finally, that operational disruption, that is something that really is painful during these things. People don't know how to log in. They don't know the UI. They don't have a user manual. They're not sure what their data means now in the future state. So we're constantly working with our clients to make sure that it's as smooth and streamlined as possible. So this is just the tip of the iceberg of what happens in an M&A. So as we were seeing it and responding to our clients and getting on the phone with them and then saying, we found another source system. That literally happened to me last summer. It's like, what do you mean? Literally found another source system because they're in these these silos of silence where they can't talk to each other. David and I got together and said, there's got to be a better way. We need to be able to respond to our clients quickly. We need to smooth this out for them as they were coming to us and saying, what should my strategy be? We're so clunky. We don't know what we're doing here. So that's really the genesis of this entire concept that we have transitioned into being called TransferAssist. With that, I will turn it over to David to give you all of the details, and we're so happy you're here. Thanks for your time. You're on mute, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I was being courteous and staying on mute. Thank you. So again, thank you, Megan. And let's dig into, now that we have the background established of the AM&D space, let's dig into the four-step framework that we're using and proposing to you as well to say, how can we streamline this? How can we accelerate it? How can we do better at this going forward? So there are four parts. I'm going to break each of them down into individual pieces. So we start with a foundation, just like the foundation in your house. Are you ready to build the next floor on that house? Are you ready to go out and acquire new product portfolio? Are you ready? Do you have the pieces in place to do that? And that can start today, even without any vision of an acquisition in mind. And we'll talk a bit about that. That's where a lot of the secret sauce is. And then once you have that foundation established, how do you do it? How do you execute it? How do you automate it? How do you improve it so that it is streamlined and efficient? So we'll talk about that. But Megan touched on a part that's critically important to me. As you can see with business over my shoulder here, I worry about the business side of this. I worry about the people. Then how do we get that horse to water and get them to drink now that we've brought them on board and get them into the new systems, get their data into a way that the incumbents of the acquiring business will accept, et cetera. So we'll talk about those aspects. And then finally, how do we make it better? How do we make it faster? How do we go from single-digit acquisitions a year to double-digit acquisitions a year, which is the story of life sciences anymore, right? Companies that I worked on in my early career don't even exist anymore. They're parts of somebody else. So how do we help you do that as you grow as well? So this is the detailed look. We're going to go step by step. These stars here are things where I'm going to provide some extra details. Not everyone, it's not death by PowerPoint, but I want to have a dialogue with you. And please feel free to add questions in the chat. Megan's observing that as well. So again, these are the four steps: foundation, execution, users, and then scalability. So the first and foremost piece, being the business guy, I live and breathe on projects around a data model, some map, some pictorial essay, if you will, on what we're dealing with. And what I mean by that is, in the old days, we called it canonical data model. In a new day, I'll call it a regulatory data model. And obviously, I'm focusing on my example here in regulatory. This fits for clinical, for quality, for safety, for any other domain, but I'll use RIM through this, which is generally the biggest part of this because you're acquiring licensed products. So that starts in regulatory and filters to the other domains. But establishing strong standards on the data you have today and putting those in place and aligning them with the industry standards. Many of you are, or in fact, perhaps all of you are from Europe, where terms like IDMP and SPOR are commonplace. I have US colleagues that don't use those acronyms very readily yet, but they certainly will as their European products and European colleagues are driving that change, especially with recent guidelines. So do you have your products aligned? Do you have your PMS data, your OMS data aligned so that now when you're moving new organizations into yours, when you're moving new products, do you know how to go out and do those changes with the EMA through the SPOR to make those changes to get those products in-house? You know how to go about the organizational changes, and each one of the elements of SPOR are handled differently, right? PMS is driven through XEV-MPD and other data-driven tools. Other parts of SPOR are done through ticketing systems and things like that. So get your house in order now so that not only is your data correct, but then you have the pathways to get this new data that you're acquiring brought in-house. So that means you have all the product relationships and the product family hierarchy, et cetera, your registration data aligned, and all the business processes around that, and a touch of governance. At least, how do we maintain this? And we'll talk more about governance in a second. So this is where we start. We have to get our own house in order. This is the same reason IDMP is happening, because for decades we've sent pictures of documents, which is what PDFs are. Now we're sending XML data, which is much richer, much more valuable, and much more focused on patient safety. How do we do that same thing as we acquire somebody else's decades of data as well? So one of those ways is my second favorite topic. First is data, and the second part is around the governance of that data. Oops, sorry. So as we look at the governance, are you anywhere on this pyramid in your current line of business? Have you defined governance roles and the policies for that? Meaning, do you know who are your stewards for the product family hierarchy? You're likely acquiring a company that is in a different space, a different line of business. If you're in blood-based therapies, and you may be going to cancer products, to oncology products, that's going to bring about a whole different set of substances, excipients, even package shelf life data. Who owns that in your world today? So that when you get a new set of data, you can give it to that person to say, okay, let's manage this the way we manage our existing information. So it's consistent. So the same quality and validation controls apply to that as they do to the incumbent data you have today, so that you can measure and monitor, because we only get out what we measure, right? And then take that all the way to the top to say, we had 100 products before, now we have 120 products thanks to this acquisition. They all look, smell, feel the same, even though they're different therapeutic areas, different ATCs, what have you. But that's the power of governance. Once we start with a strong model, build the controls on top of it, we can then absorb that new data much more readily. So hopefully this is gelling and making sense. Now, here is the secret sauce, the idea I want to put in your head, the biggest part of today's presentation. And this is what we're calling a pre-AM&D assessment. Now, for those of you who have been through mergers before, you're saying, wait a minute, I can't talk to the acquiree, the company we're acquiring. That's illegal. You're right. And we're not proposing you do that. However, how many times, Meghan alluded to it, where a client will call us and say, hey, we just bought ABC company. We have 6 weeks to get all their data in, go. Well, wait a minute. Can we take a look? And that's where this AM&D assessment is really key. And it hinges on this third party piece. Why? What do I mean by that? Is because a third party, whether it's FME or somebody else, but can be a bridge from you into that acquiree, into that company you're buying, but they can do it before the legal close happens, before the clock starts, and you turn into a pumpkin like Cinderella in 6 weeks or whatever that too short time frame is, right? Through an NDA with you, an NDA with the acquired to be acquired company, a third party can act on your behalf and sniff out issues with system inventory. Meghan said a problem we both dealt with was, hey, we have a new system. Oh, and by the way, it's SharePoint, which has really minimal help in terms of classification of information, et cetera. And it really added a lot of work in a very short period of time. But we can sniff that out in advance, especially with a pair of eyes experienced in data migration, data quality assessments, et cetera. So the right people, that third party has to be the right people to look. So not the management consultants that are dealing with the business to business stuff. That has its own importance, but this is the tactical, technical level that is looking at the system so that we can identify where the risks are. We can look at the data model we have and the governance strategy and say, we've got some product families that are going to be a problem. We've got to deal with some substances we've never dealt with before, et cetera. And we can do all of that before the clock starts ticking. So to us, that's a huge element of success here, and one we've been working now with clients to try to embed in their processes for that same value, that same return on that process, because we can go as an emissary into that to be acquired company and find those facts out before legal close. So the next step, now that we've established our foundation, let's talk about how do we execute this? How do we keep this automated? How do we move faster and faster and faster? Well, the first thing is on the migration playbook side. So what I mean by that is, and again, we're heavily focused on migration, so this is our space. How do we move that data, whether it's from an old system to a new or an external system to an internal system? It's essentially the same piece. And what an accelerator does in this case is you establish your migration process, your migration funnel, if you will, so that you have a verified/validated approach to getting content into your incumbent system. And now all you're doing, and you can see my air quotes, so I'm not minimizing it, but now you're just taking a different data source and bringing it into a funnel that you've already verified and established and know how to use it. So in our case, we have Migration Center, our migration tool. So getting that installed, configured, working to your system is the precursor to that. So now we're not starting from scratch. We already have a channel to bring that content in. And then, as Meghan pointed out, in our case, we follow the sun. Whomever you partner with needs to be able to follow the sun because of the reduced timeline. We don't have much time. And so to be able to bring in that data using an established process that does follow the day allows you to get a lot more done a lot more quickly. So a critical piece. Now, another area in the execution side that wasn't even in the imagination when my hair was brown, which was decades ago, is the use of things like AI to help with this. Now, I have been on M&A activities where I literally had to take my phone and have Google Translate on here, snap a picture of the screen in real time, translate Russian to English on a document that's stored on a server in Israel, so I can see that that's an investigator brochure, so that I can tag it and say, that's an IB, I'll put it in clinical, and away we go. Now, that's very slow, and it's very error prone and requires a lot of human capital, human knowledge, and not everybody is capable of doing those kinds of things. And so as we talk about automating this, this is another area of critical importance to us that we suggest you strongly consider as well. So we're starting with how do we figure out the data we're trying to bring in an AM&D situation to actually preparing it for migration. Well, there's some steps in between. And so the first thing we have to do is look at that data, analyze it against what? Our regulatory data model, that canonical model that gives us the map of what we need to profile against. Right? Now we know there's going to be some manual cleanup. There are some things that SQL can't fix. Or you can try, you spin your wheels and you get programmatic mess. Yeah, you did it fast and you did it a lot, but it's not right. So there are some things where we have to enrich, we have to refactor, we have to do that manually. But when we get into the big levels, this is where the AI in this third box is starting to play a very, very critical role, where instead of my phone and Google Translate, I can now take an NLP tool using a large language model to classify those documents sitting out there in the source system. And I have no business people to talk to because they've left since they're being acquired. They're not around. So I've got to do it all myself with blinders on. So I can leverage AI to bring that in, to map it against MDM from, again, my model. I can map it against SPORE, which is also coming again from that regulatory or quality or clinical data model, and build the enrichment tools and sheets and refactor the data that I need to prepare for that migration. So now I have a channel, I have a pathway to take that data from the source, get it aligned with our target system, prepare those enrichment tools and sheets and things so that we can take it where? To that funnel we established at the top of this framework, right? That migration funnel. So now I'm bringing the data and the tools I need to push it right into that funnel. And so when you pull all those things together, I've got the migration platform in place. I've got a team around the world to do it and to exercise that. And then I can put all of those pieces together and prepare it because I've got my models in place, and I've looked ahead to see where the problems are. So we've already rectified it. So those just 6 steps together, I think, make a lot of difference in this whole M&A process. So if we think about, I mentioned the word process. If we think about an old school model called POLDAT, P-O-L-D-A-T, that may be familiar to some of you. That's process, organization, location. Process, organization, location. Those are above the technology line. So those are the people things, right? People perform processes, or at least in the old days. Now we have agentic AI, but let's assume it's doing it on behalf of a person. And those people are organized in organizational roles, and they have places they work. That's the locations. So that's the people side. Underneath that, we have the data, applications, and technology, DAT, data, applications, and technology. So the technology is already done. You have your incumbent platform, the application is there as well. The data is what we're bringing over. So out of those 6 things, 3 of them are around people and only 1 is around data. So we need to make sure that we're getting the people part right. And so let's take a different look. Now, this is a roadmap of how we would typically do a migration, whether it's AM&D or moving from Documentum to Viva or to Generis Carr or where have you. There is some upfront work. That's a phase 0. It's a pre-migration assessment, if you will, where we're getting our house in order, looking at the data quality. In the context of AM&D, that fits right into our pre-AM&D assessment. Let's take those standard skills and practices and go out there as an emissary and figure that out. Then we start doing the ETL, the extract, transform, and load processes around the data, right? So this is typically how we would do that. Now we do it through, we plan the migration and then we do some dry runs. We test it, right? Does this new therapeutic area really fit in our Viva Vault or in our Generis Carr or wherever it's going, right? And we do our testing and our production. But what about the people? And the point is, let's align it with the people. I'm showing orange here for Viva. It could be blue for Generis. It could be green for somebody else. But those people that you're acquiring and bringing in need training. They need onboarding. They need, as Meghan said, to figure out how to get their laptop online. But so do the incumbents. Now we have new product families. We have new application submissions. We may have new constructs that we didn't have before because we've got new types of therapies. So there's training all around. So let's align our migration work with that so that they're seeing this data and they're testing it. They're exercising it as they're getting onboarded so that when they're onboarded and that data is brought over, you're ready. They're ready. Your system's ready. The incumbent team is ready as well. So a critically important element that we see in this usability piece to making sure we're all aligned. And so with that, we talked about change management. You know, we can send, not me, but people are sending a Tesla to Mars, apparently, right? We can get a vehicle out into space, but golly, can we get somebody to use our CRM system properly or follow the templates that we're working on? At this day and age, the software is the easy part. It's the people part that's hardest. We define the people part all the way from the data model and the governance all the way to now using that system in practice. And so the migration aspects of this are key elements. I'm working on a project now where they're moving from one system platform to another, and we spend a significant amount of time focusing on what will the impact to the users be if we make this decision in the data. It's a very different decision or discussion than an IT-focused approach because it's all about the people. And that includes getting rid of, in simple terms, decommissioning those legacy systems, which may mean that some of the data coming in from the acquired company isn't important. It goes into an archival system instead. But that we quickly get the acquired team off their tools onto the acquiring team's tools and platforms, and in a compliant way, archive the rest. So what do all three of these stages do for us? They prepare us to then step back and optimize and scale this process. So that zero friction integration process that we're talking about is by having the model in place, by having our migration process in place, by looking at the data before we actually go pull the trigger, we can then ease the process. We can make that frictionless as much as possible. There's always friction in IT, there's always friction in migrations, but now you have a roadmap to get through that instead of, oh my, what do I do, right? We can reduce the operational burden on internal teams because we put these things in place. Governance is self-governing, right? If we're not asking the questions over and over again, but have a process to follow, we let people do their day jobs. Some of their day jobs are governance, but it's constrained, it's packaged, it's put in the proper context. And then our suggestion on the final side is something we do to ourselves. We've now done 4 different AM&D projects for a particular client. As we do the 5th one, we don't just rubber stamp our approach. We say, what did we learn? And we do this with the client. What can we do better next time? What can we do differently next time? And you should do that for yourselves, as in anything we do, right? So that's the last step. So now let's look forward. My mouse is disappearing. There we go. Okay. So let's try to sum up some of these lessons learned into some concepts here. I said the secret sauce was by far accessing the data as early as possible. You can't do it yourself, but a third party can. And we've stepped in those traps by not doing it. And so it is something that we highly encourage, that emissarial role of a third party to look at the source, because quite often the acquiring company doesn't, or the acquiree doesn't want to share all the warts in their systems, all the issues, and somebody knowledgeable about what to look for can really accelerate that process significantly. Now, one of the things we really haven't talked about, but is an important lesson that I've had to deal with personally, and that's back to my phone, right? So there were no SMEs, or there was one left. That person was 10 hours ahead of me in Israel. And I had no real connection, no ability to reach them in any relative time frame, because all of the SMEs that knew their data, knew their systems, had left and were gone to different places. So expect the unexpected, expect that the SMEs won't be there, and that you have to have ways to do without them. That's where AI is coming into play now, where instead of my Google Translate, I can use Metadata Assist, our AI tool, to do this and pull that classification out, pull the metadata out much more quickly, higher level of quality, and independent of SMEs. Put the human in the loop to verify it, etc. But that's how we handle getting around that issue. Now, we know, get in early, watch out that people won't be there. But then what can we do ourselves that is independent of all that? And that's getting our house in order. That's the standardized piece. So putting a couple of those bullets together, getting the migration platform in place, getting your data model in place, getting your governance in place, and standardizing those things against a common goal. That's what SPOR does for us. That's the whole promise of IDMP, right? We'll have standardized ways of describing our medicinal products, our excipients, et cetera. And so let's get our house in order so we can ingest this new content in the same way. And by doing so, we have to then also govern that piece and make sure it stays that way. And when we do those things, we now have the ability to say, okay, bring it on. Let's do another one. We're ready. And instead of waiting for the news release that says, oh, company ABC bought a new company, we're already for that, we're prepared. We have that structure in place, all of those elements I spoke about, to now just have an engine for an AM&D engine and let the business worry about who they want to buy and what portfolio they want to add. But from an IT level perspective, from an organizational change perspective, we're prepared. So hopefully that makes sense. And I think those are really the key elements that of lessons that we've learned the hard way. So what have we done? So what we've done with that is we've turned that into something Meghan highlighted initially, something we call TransferAssist, transferring information from an acquired company to the acquiring company or divesting data to a new business. We work on both sides. And so this has multiple elements. It starts with that pre-AM&D, AM&D inspection piece, that emissarial role, critically important, and one that we really strongly suggest happens. That gets us to inspection-ready data so that as a result of this, we're able to produce the output that says, here's our migration plan, here's how we migrated it, here's how we brought it into our data model, here's how it's going to be governed, and here, inspector, here's proof, a critical element of the whole process, which having these pieces in place reduces the impact, as I mentioned before, on the incumbent business so you can focus on your day jobs and let the engine that's running bring this in, efficiently bringing that data in, and so ensuring that the communications are effective, because it's always about communication, whether it's an IT project or a marriage, it all comes down to communication, right? So if we have a repeatable process in place, we know what to expect. We know when to get the metrics. We know when to see if we're really governing the data and pull that out. And so then we, again, to get to the inspection ready data, we have to do a validated approach. And so bringing that together makes incredible sense. And verifying that migration is part of it. We mentioned Part 11 compliance, but it's broader than that, right? It's how did we map all of this information and migrate it in successfully? And here's proof, right? So that at the end, we're streamlined and efficient in this entire process. So hopefully these pieces make sense to you. Hopefully the lessons learned are impactful. That the pre-AM&D assessment is just a critical idea that I want you to take away from this with, because I think it'll make a huge difference on your activities, both as mergers or divestitures, either way. Thank you all.